My uncle announced he now owned the company I built, like he was reading the weather. No pause, no hesitation, just confidence laid flat on the table. The board approved it in minutes. I watched the votes light up one by one on the screen, green circles stacking, like this had been decided long before any of us sat down. No discussion, no questions, just speed, the kind that pretends efficiency is the same thing as certainty. My father sat 2 seats away from me, Gerald. He kept his hands folded and his eyes fixed on the edge of the table, like eye contact might accidentally implicate him in something. That hurt more than the vote. The chairman, Martin Cole, cleared his throat. "So," he said carefully, "do you accept the transfer of operational authority?" Every head turned toward me. They expected anger, a reaction, a crack. I didn't give them one. "Not yet," I said. My voice sounded steady, even to me. "I'd like to wait until our silent partner is present." There it was. Confusion rippled across the room. My Uncle Victor smiled thinly. "We've covered all stakeholders," he said. "There is no silent partner." I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I just sat back in my chair. The room filled with small noises, papers shifting, someone coughing, a pen clicking too fast. Martin glanced at the clock, then back at me. "We don't have time for games." That's when the elevator dinged. The doors slid open. A man I didn't recognize walked in. Dark suit, no rush. He crossed the room, set a badge on the table, face down. Martin leaned forward, then stood up slowly. "Oh," he said, "we've made a mistake." And just like that, everything changed. No one spoke right away. The man who just walked in didn't introduce himself. He didn't need to. The badge on the table said enough. Heavy, federal issued, the kind you don't casually place face down unless you're used to rooms changing once people read your name. My Uncle Victor laughed softly. "I'm sorry, who are you supposed to be?" The man ignored him and looked straight at Martin Cole, the chairman. "You approved a transfer without confirming full ownership structure." Martin swallowed. "We followed the documents provided." "Yes," the man said calmly, "the incomplete ones." That's when my father finally looked at me, just for a second. There was something like recognition there, or fear, hard to tell. I cleared my throat. "I asked to wait," I said. Not louder, not sharper, just on the record. Victor turned toward me, irritation flashing now. "You don't get to delay this. You were outvoted." I wasn't delaying, I was preventing an error. The man finally turned the badge over. His name read Evan Richter. Under it, Federal Compliance and Oversight. "You see," Evan said, addressing the room, "this company has a silent equity holder, not listed on your summary, not transferable without review." Martin's chair scraped back as he stood. Why wasn't this disclosed? I answered before anyone else could. Because the agreement requires disclosure only if someone tries to move control without consent. Victor's face tightened. "That's not advisable?" Evan finished. "Correct." The room felt smaller now, heavier, and suddenly the speed they'd been so proud of looked a lot like negligence. They always misunderstood my quiet. They thought it meant uncertainty or weakness, or that I'd finally accepted my place at the edge of the table. What they never considered was that silence can be strategic, that sometimes the loudest move is waiting. I built the company from a folding table in a subleased office, late nights, early hires, mistakes we fixed ourselves because there was no one else to call. Victor showed up only after the numbers did. My father came even later, when the board seats were already labeled. Victor liked to tell people he'd guided me, that he'd helped steady the ship. It sounded impressive if you didn't ask for details. The details were the point. Evan Richter stood there patiently while the board shuffled papers they'd skimmed too fast. Someone asked for a recess. Martin rubbed his temples like he was trying to wake up from a bad dream. "This is absurd," Victor snapped. "You're saying there's an owner no one here knows?" Evan's tone didn't change. "I'm saying there's an interest you didn't bother to verify." My father finally spoke. "Why wouldn't you tell us?" he asked me, quietly. I met his eyes. "Because no one asked when it mattered." That landed, harder than I expected. Evan placed another document on the table. "This agreement predates the current board. Any transfer of control triggers an automatic review." "And if it already happened?" Martin asked. "It didn't, because he asked to wait." I didn't smile. I didn't need to. The mistake wasn't that they moved too fast, it was that they assumed speed could outrun proof. The room changed after that. Not dramatically, no shouting. Just a subtle shift, like everyone realized they were standing on a floor they hadn't checked for cracks. Victor leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, trying to look amused. "So what?" he said. "There's some paperwork issue? We fix it, move on." Evan Richter didn't look at him. "This isn't a clerical error, it's a structural one." Martin exhaled slowly. "Explain." Evan nodded toward me. "The silent partner's stake isn't passive. It was designed as a control counterweight. Any attempt to consolidate ownership without consent freezes the action and flags oversight." One of the board members asked, "Flags to who?" Evan didn't answer immediately. He let the silence do its work. "To us." Victor's jaw tightened. "You're saying he planned this?" I shook my head. "I'm saying I prepared for it." My father shifted in his seat. He looked older than I remembered, smaller somehow. "All this time," he said quietly, "you could have stopped him." I did, just not loudly. Martin closed the folder in front of him. "Then this vote is invalid." Victor shot to his feet. "You can't just—" "Yes," Martin interrupted. "We can and we will." The words hung there, final and unmovable. Victor looked around the table, waiting for support. None came. That's when I saw it. Not anger, not panic, confusion. Because for the first time, confidence wasn't enough, and nothing he said next was going to change that. Victor didn't sit back down. He paced behind his chair, hands moving now, voice louder. "This is a misunderstanding," he insisted. "I followed the process. I had approval." "You had speed, not authority," Evan said evenly. Martin slid a thin folder across the table toward Victor. "This was filed 2 years ago," he said. "You signed acknowledgement." Victor stopped pacing. "I don't remember this." "That's not a defense," Martin replied. My father finally leaned forward. "What happens now?" Evan answered before anyone else could. "Now we look at intent." The word landed like a weight. He tapped the folder. "The clause is clear. Any attempt to consolidate ownership without disclosure triggers review and penalties." Victor laughed again, but it didn't sound convincing this time. Penalties for what? Ambition? For misrepresentation and for pressuring the board to act without full disclosure. I watched my father's face drain slowly. He wasn't surprised. He was realizing how much he'd ignored. Martin folded his hands. "The transfer is void. Control remains unchanged pending review." "And my position?" Victor demanded. Martin met his eyes. "Under scrutiny." Silence followed. Not awkward, final. I gathered my notes, stood, and pushed my chair in. No one stopped me. As I reached the door, Evans spoke once more. "One thing," he said. "If this had gone through, it would have been irreversible." I nodded. "That's why I asked to wait." I stepped into the hallway as the door closed behind me. Inside, they were still arguing. Out here, the company was still mine, and the difference came down to one thing. Who bothered to read what was already written? They called a recess. 10 minutes that stretched into 30 while lawyers whispered and assistants ran documents back and forth like time might soften what had already hardened. I stayed in the hallway, leaning against the glass, watching my reflection blur with the skyline. My phone buzzed once. My father. I didn't answer. When they called us back in, the chairs felt farther apart. Victor's confidence hadn't vanished. It had fractured. He spoke carefully now, like someone learning a new language mid-sentence. Martin cleared his throat. "We're reopening governance review effective immediately." Victor snapped, "You can't punish initiative." Evan Richter didn't look up from his tablet. "We're not. We're correcting exposure." Someone asked what that meant. Evan listed it calmly. Suspension of authority, audit of communications, preservation orders. Words that don't raise voices, but end arguments. My father tried once more. "Can we resolve this internally?" Martin shook his head. It was internal until it wasn't. Victor turned to me finally. "You knew this would happen." "I knew it could. That's why it existed." He stared like the room had changed rules without telling him. Maybe it had, or maybe he'd just never read them. Martin closed the folder in front of him. "All motions stand dismissed. Any further action requires full disclosure and consent." The gavel didn't drop. There wasn't one, but it felt like something closed. As we filed out, Evan paused beside me. "Quiet planning ages well," he said. I watched Victor linger behind, surrounded by papers that suddenly mattered. Proof doesn't argue. It waits. The meeting ended without ceremony. People packed up faster than they'd arrived. Eyes down, conversations clipped. The kind of exit that pretends nothing unusual happened, even when everyone knows it did. My father walked beside me toward the elevator. We didn't speak at first. The silence between us felt older than the building. "You didn't have to do it like that," he said finally. I pressed the button. "I didn't do anything." He looked at me then, really looked. "You let him fall." I shook my head. He stepped where he shouldn't have. I just didn't pull him back. The elevator doors closed. We rode down in quiet. At the lobby, he hesitated, like he wanted to say something else. An apology, maybe, or a justification. He chose neither. Victor passed us on the way out. He didn't meet my eyes. The man who'd announced ownership minutes ago now looked unsure which door belonged to him. That's when I realized what none of them had asked. Not once. They never asked why the silent partner existed, never asked what kind of pressure had made that protection necessary in the first place. They'd been too busy assuming trust. Outside, Evan Richter stood near the curb, already on a call. He caught my eye and gave a small nod. Professional. Finished. I waited for the relief to hit. It didn't. What I felt instead was clarity. Power doesn't always arrive with force. Sometimes it arrives prepared, sits quietly, and waits for someone else to make the mistake. And once they do, you don't need to explain anything at all. The company didn't wobble after that. That surprised people. They expect drama when something like this happens. Emails flying, executives resigning, stock dipping. None of that came. Systems held, teams kept working. The lights stayed on. That's the part no one notices when planning is done right. Victor didn't return to the office. Not that week, not the next. His name stayed on documents for a while, then quietly stopped appearing. No announcement, just absence, the professional kind. I spent the afternoon doing normal things. Signed off on a vendor contract, reviewed a hiring plan, ate a late lunch at my desk. Ordinary hours have a way of restoring scale. My father sent a message that evening. We should talk. I stared at it longer than I meant to, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I finally knew what I didn't owe. I replied with one line, "There's nothing urgent." And there wasn't. The silent partner didn't change my role. It didn't elevate me. It didn't punish anyone on my behalf. It did exactly what it was meant to do, keep control from moving without consent.
People mistake restraint for mercy. It's not. It's discipline. That night, I locked up the office myself. Lights off, door secure, city humming outside like it always had. The company was fine. I was fine. The mistake wasn't corrected with anger or triumph. It was corrected by design. And design, once set, doesn't need anyone's permission to keep working.
It came the next day. An email from my uncle, marked urgent, written in the careful tone people use when they realize leverage is gone. He didn't apologize for trying to take the company. He apologized for how things looked. He wrote about misunderstandings, about assumptions, about how families sometimes move too quickly when emotions are high. He suggested we meet privately, without lawyers or outside interference, and reset. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, because the email answered a question I'd been carrying for years. He hadn't misjudged me. He'd counted on me. Counted on hesitation, on loyalty, on the discomfort people feel when saying no to someone who shares their blood. The board followed up later that afternoon. Short message, neutral language, review complete, governance reaffirmed, the quiet kind of confirmation that doesn't invite debate. My father didn't reach out again. I don't know if that was pride or understanding finally catching up. Maybe both. Either way, it felt settled. That evening, I walked through the office one last time before heading home. Same desks, same lights, same hum. Nothing looked different, but everything was. Because when someone shows you they'll move your life around without asking, the correct response isn't outrage, it's structure. I didn't win anything that day. I kept what I built, and sometimes that's the only victory that matters. There was no press release, no victory lap, no lesson learned speech handed out after the fact. Life moved forward the way it usually does when something important is handled correctly, quietly, without disruption. Meetings resumed, decisions got made. People focused on work instead of speculation. That's how you know it's over. Victor faded from relevance faster than I expected. Not ruined, not punished publicly, just no longer central. Influence disappears that way when it isn't backed by substance. My father and I didn't have the conversation people imagine, no late-night reconciliation, no emotional clarity. Some things don't resolve into understanding, they resolve into distance, and distance in this case felt appropriate. Here's what stayed with me. Power doesn't come from speaking the loudest in the room. It comes from knowing when not to speak at all, from reading what others skim, from building safeguards before you need them, from letting systems do what emotion never can. If you're listening to this and you've ever been pressured to give up what you built because family, or asked to move fast when something feels off, pause. Speed is not proof. Confidence is not consent. And if someone panics when you ask to wait, that tells you everything. If this story made you think, even for a second, stay with me. Like it. Subscribe. Share it with someone who needs the reminder. Quiet preparation saves more than loud resistance ever will.